All right, we've got a lot more coming up here, and just get their read on all of this. Brian Brenberg is back with us, the King's College Business and Economics professor. I say many, many times, if I had professors like him, I would have done much better than I'm doing right now. Also, Mitch Roschelle, if I had people like him on shows in the past who could explain in English, well, I'd have much more popular shows. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. Enough about me. Let's get back to what the president is saying right now about tapping the reserve. Mitch, this notion that we're going to go hit the reserve again, do we need to do that?
I don't think so. First of all, the first word in SPR is strategic and not P for political. And this is clearly a political move, in my view, just 20-some days before the midterms. And your intro to the segment, Neil, was all facts, and never let facts get in the way of a good story, because I think that's what the president did, was really telling a story and leaving out. Well, it'd be one thing if
they were consistent, right? I mean, to say, all right, I can't always take credit when it goes my way, but I could certainly shift blame, and that's natural for a politician to do. I just wonder in this case whether it confuses folks.
It does, and first of all, when you weaponize profits, and you nailed it, right? So let's remember, when President Trump was looking on about refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, he was talking about $24 a barrel.
Right.
So if you want to talk about profits, we sold SPR at $90 a barrel when we would have paid $24 a barrel. And he got pushback from Democrats when he was talking about doing that. And then the price at the pump thing, I spoke to two local businesses. One is a home heating oil business, and the other is a first-generation American who owns a gas station. The first-generation guy who owns a gas station has been struggling throughout this entire period because of the volatility in the price. He doesn't know what he's going to lock in at to have price at the pump that makes sense. He can't lower the price. The home heating oil company, when it got to $140 a barrel, they had to buy futures contracts for this winter, and they were paying upwards of $6 a gallon for diesel.
That's an excellent point.
Right, and what happens when it drops down and the market is now $5? They're going to lose $1 a gallon because they have to make their customers happy. So you can't weaponize profits, as you said, in the good times and then not leave a reserve for the bad times.
Well, there was no choir out for the industry when it was dealing with $0, remember, under that, and that's either here or there. But I do wonder, I mean, when you talk to young people and your students, and there's sort of an inherent distrust of oil companies. That's just baked in the cake. But in this case, it's misplaced.
Well, look, you talk about whether people are confused by what the president is saying or not. I don't think anybody's confused here. They're looking at what he's saying, and they're hearing the same thing they always hear. Number one, it's not that bad. Okay, and number two, blame oil companies. There's your contradiction. Okay, which one are you really selling me here? But the selective choosing of data is the real problem here. And it's a problem politically for him because it misses the reality people are living in. He can spout all the numbers that he wants to. He can talk about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and the elimination of, or the release of barrels. But the guy at home, the guy at home is still sitting there saying, I'm staring for gas at $3.85 a gallon, and if it's diesel, it's over $5. And you're really not changing that story.
And you're making it glaring when you're taking the credit when it goes down, not when it goes up. I get that. I understand that. But I mean, you've got to look at the reality here. This is something that's traded on the global markets. Now, I'm just wondering, guys, if the elixir and the problem solution here for the president might ironically be a global slowdown that has taken us down from these $100 plus oil days to $85 now. And that's just a hiccup. We could go slide further, having nothing to do with the reserve and everything to do with the whole globe slowing.
Well, if you look at the price coming down, when we were watching the president, I heard Mitch over here chuckling about it, but he said, we've been able to bring down prices with these releases. And everybody knows that's not what's happening. Everybody's looking around the globe and saying, economies are slowing down, demand is slowing down, and that's bringing down the price of oil. Notice the president never talks about refineries either. He thinks there's this mismatch between the price of oil and the price of gas. Well, guess what? 5 refineries in the U.S. have closed over the past 2 years. Nobody's looking at investing there because they know this administration's so hostile. You want to fix that, Mr. President? Green lights.
Well, that's a very good point, because you think about it, Mitch. I mean, if you're going to invest tens of billions of dollars in something, you need something better than a couple of year horizon to show you, because they've made it very clear, and certainly the signal out of states like New York and California is that they want to be fossil free from those type of vehicles in the next decade or so. So if you're going to make a commitment and put that much money up front, and you know what you're pushing is something the administration, the powers that be, hate, that's a gamble for you to even try to take advantage of in an environment where refining capacity is already running at close to 95%.
So just politically speaking, you had Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders debating one-on-one, and the moderator of the debate asked specifically about the oil and gas industry, and he said, we're getting out of that business as a country. If you were an investor in oil and gas, you just woke up that morning and sold. Okay?
Right.
So if you're a company that has to spend billions of dollars that probably needs a 20-year horizon to recoup those billions of dollars, you're not going to invest it. The other day, you had Congresswoman Tlaib talking to the biggest money center banks in the world that happen to all be U.S.-based and asking specific questions. Jamie Dimon heroically referred to those policies as a road to hell, okay? And everybody else. And the question was, for the audience purposes, are you going to continue to bank the oil and gas industry because it's, evil? When that's the rhetoric that you're hearing, if you are in the oil and gas industry, we're going to take away your ability to borrow money from J.P. Morgan Chase or Bank of America, or we're going to get out of the industry. Why would you invest in those refineries? Or why, if you're a wildcat driller, are you going to take your family's fortune and invest in, 3 more pumps in the backyard? You're not
if it was in your financial interest to do so, and these guys are businessmen and women, and of course they would do so if it's in their financial interest to do it. But right now it's so prohibitive, it is not. So I guess if the message coming from Washington is, we don't like your industry, never have, never will. Yeah. And we'd rather get it from the Saudis if they're so willing, which they're not.
Which they're not.
Or Venezuela or Iran. We'd rather get it from some of these players. Then that argument for clean energy begins to loosen up. Even Germany and Italy and France, all these other countries are finding some fossil fuel alternatives because they're behind a brick and a hard place.
Well, and because they're about 20 years ahead of us in terms of experiencing what happens when you go down this road.
Be all in on everything.
Well, but they went so in on green, they lost the infrastructure they needed for their fossil fuels. And as a result, when the world changes, they're in trouble. The president speaks nonsense when he talks about his climate agenda on the one hand and increasing production on the other. And everybody knows it. And the people who know it the most are the industry, that he and we really need to invest. And exactly to Mitch's point and yours, they say there is no way we're in if this guy is in office. It's not going to change till the leadership says there's a new regime when it comes to an all-in approach, not just a green energy.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Charlie Gasparino, as you know, we try to eschew politics here. No one cares what my opinion is. It's pointless, so I don't repeat. I have strong opinions on things like food, but generally, there's other stuff I try not to get into. But Charlie, one thing that was bothering me is that there were a lot of people going to seize on the president's remarks and assume, oh, it is the oil companies, sort of cornering this market, it's screwing us, gouging us. Even when the president threw it out there when Hurricane Ian hit Florida, that, you better not gouge, as if. And they've done countless, studies into this over the, 40, 50 years, where not one time was there any proof, any indication that was going on. But again, just to throw it out there was enough to give people pause and say, what do you make of this?
Listen, we have 3 weeks to the midterms. If you look at the polling, it's starting to switch more to economic issues, which is bad for the Democrats, inflation, a potential recession, the stock market being crazy. I will say this, and this kind of tells you something about the Biden agenda and how difficult it is to balance. On one hand, he knows, his advisors, I know who they are. They understand the whole notion that the oil industry is essentially fighting with one hand tied behind its back in terms of drilling, because environmental groups, as you said, are challenging those leases. The Biden administration, Biden himself, point blank, said he wanted to put out of business the oil industry. They're facing massive regulatory headwinds. He's got to balance that on top of the fact that is purely inflationary. So how do you do that politically? And the only way you can do that is essentially to create a lie that the oil industry is essentially causing gas prices to remain high and to spin it that way. And it's actually pretty pathetic, but it's the only thing left when you got 3 weeks left to the midterms. I will tell you this. I spent a lot of time with Wall Street CEO types. Last night I met with a bunch of them. There wasn't a man or a woman who didn't say that the Biden economic policy, particularly as it involves the oil industry, is not absurd. It is. These are Democrats, a lot of them. They are saying that all the incentives are pushed against the oil companies, and they can't believe that the United States of America is begging Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to drill for
Well,
more
to your
oil.
point, John, that is it. And you know, Brian, that's what's at stake here, right? If you're going to argue, you know, that we're going to be clean energy and all, and then you look abroad and you see what's going on in Europe, and you see Germany even looking at nuclear, looking at coal, France the same. They're looking at all their other options because they're pushed against the wall. It doesn't mean they've lessened their commitment to climate change or whatever, whether you agree with that or not. But they've had to sort of dodge and weave and adjust to the world in which we live.
Why do we want to walk down the path they've walked down? You know, just because their back's against the wall and now they're maybe going to start to do some smart things, why do we want to get our back against the wall? We don't have to do that. We can control to a significant degree what's happening in world energy markets if we're smart at home. But this administration, I hear Charlie wants to get in.
Just ignore him.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
You sound like my wife.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, no, I was going to say, why is it more, efficient and more green energy forward to get oil from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela than to drill it here? If you think about it,
we have plenty of it here.
It's not only that, we're still using the same amount. We still have needs. The needs are being met not by us. It's being met by overseas. The Biden administration, the environmentalists make you think that if you drill more, people will use it more. Well, that's not necessarily the case. We use it to meet demand based on the type of economy we have. We're not. If you drill more, that doesn't mean necessarily you're going to use more. All we're doing here, because we're going to use the same amount anyway.
Open. Keep them all open.
But all we're doing here, Neil, because we have the same, we need the same amount basically, is get it from overseas and make the cost higher. That's all we're doing here.
Well, again, it keeps going back to this, right, Mitch, being all in on this. But the fact of the matter is, we got the Dow down about 263 points. I don't like to overanalyze one day's movement or 1 minute's movement, as you've reminded me, Mitch, and Professor, at the same time. But I am wondering here, the president has been, you know, all over the country, at least, you know, going to a lot of blue states, actually, which I don't know how productive that is, but talking about the Inflation Reduction Act is going to yield great results. Drug costs are going to come down. Let's say that's even true on the drug cost front. That's a small part of overall price inflation going on right now. So I'm just wondering, is there something you see that we're missing here, or that the president is saying that maybe I'm missing here? What do you think?
Well, first of all, drug costs, that's really for seniors. So that's, to me, political pandering.
Be careful how you describe seniors.
Well, I'm not too far away.
Brian is alien to this.
You know, what are you trying to say?
He takes a couple of aspirin and calls it a day.
Yeah, I got the AAP card in the mail myself. But the fact of the matter is, I think that that's a constituent that he's going after.
And that might work for them, but it doesn't offset all the other stuff that they're facing.
And you and I have said this before many times, as has Brian, inflation is the cure for inflation. So if you don't have a real way to attack it, all you can do is just try to wash out demand. And oil prices will come down when there's less demand for oil, to Charlie's point, because the economy around the world is slowing. What really scares me, though, right now is emboldening Iran around the world and making Iran, you know, creating customers for Iran, because they're the number one state sponsor of terror. And all this has done is take one of the most dangerous countries in the world and give them more power, Russia aside. And that really scares me.
Professor, when you talk to young people about this, and I always go back to this because they look at things in a world that's very different. They're those quiet quitters. They're the ones who are not sure what to make if they want to be part of this typical work world. And they're angry. Will that anger persist?
Well, actually, I hope it does. I hope that young people get angry, and anger fuels thought. You know, be angry and do not sin. There's something motivating about not liking what's happening in the world and saying we need to do something different. Yeah. Right now, I'm afraid there's too much apathy. Nobody's digging in. The president says what he wants to say about where gas prices are and oil production is, and they say, well, it's the president. He must be saying what's correct. No, dig in and understand.
So be angry, get angry.
Be angry, and then use it in a way that helps the world get better.
So what you're saying is be a little more Italian. Is that
kind of what I mean, depending on who I'm talking to.
That's be angry.
There we go, be angry.
That's a whole different anger issue.
There we go, a whole different issue.